off. Peace and blessings, and welcome to another episode of How Now, where we talk about how to live in the now. I'm your host, Kim Martin Raymond, and I am a minister, spiritual life coach, author, and founder of Redefining You LLC, where I help my clients to realign themselves, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome again to another episode, and this week's episode is entitled Living in the Now When a Family Member is Chronically Ill. And this is something that a lot of us are experiencing in this season of pandemic. We have had people who have been exposed to the virus. We've had people who have been considered long haulers, who have survived but have had, have developed illnesses that have been chronic. But we have also had people who have had existing conditions and things that have happened prior to the pandemic. But either way, it's worth the conversation to talk about these things, because in this time and in this season, there are those added pressures of how we deal with helping chronically ill people who are in our care. And I have some amazing guests with me this evening who are just, they're near and dear to my heart, because I had the pleasure of working with their daughter, who was a former student of mine. And so, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, but I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as customary with How Now, because when we introduce ourselves, we allow people to receive us in the manner in which they want to be received. So with that being said, I'm going to ask my guests to introduce themselves at this time.
Thank you, Kim. It is such a privilege to be here. So my name is Carl McColman, and my tagline, if you visit my website, my tagline is soul friend and storyteller.
Yes.
I'm a blogger. I'm also a podcaster, and I have written some books. And most of all, I'm somebody who is just simply trying to live a conscious, contemplative life. And I guess that's probably enough for now. I'm sure more will kind of come out as our conversation evolves.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Fran McColman. I'm Carl's wife. I am also I'm retired from the school system, where I worked in special ed, doing materials production for students that were blind and visually impaired. Now I'm retired, and we work part-time at our church, but also I am a fiber artist. I hand paint silk scarves, and since the pandemic started, I have started two new things. I've been making masks, and also I've started ice dyeing shirts, tapestries, things like that. So yes, I think that's good.
Awesome. Like I said, I am thrilled that you both are here. Again, thank you so much for joining me and for talking about this topic that, like I said, has touched your family and has touched me as a person who is, a part of your family in a way.
Absolutely.
I'll say that. I think it's safe to say that, we've broken bread, we have visited one another. We have our lives and our paths have crossed, many years ago. And, that's something that, I think it's safe to say we have a little bit of family status there. So again, I'm happy you guys are here. Yes. So, like I said, we want to talk about, family members that are chronically ill. And of course, we cannot talk about that subject without talking about your daughter, Rhiannon. And Rhiannon, what a beautiful spirit. Like I said, I had the opportunity to have her as a student. I believe she was 13 years old when she was a student. She was in middle school, and I was working as a paraprofessional, and Rhiannon was in my class, and when I say she changed my life, she did. We sang so many songs together. All I have to say, the acoustics in the bathrooms at the school were
Music was so important to her.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, oh my good, and I loved her with all of my heart. And she little stories, things that we did. People come along in your life and they change your life for the better. They make you recognize the good in all that's around you, and that's what Rhiannon did. And so, I want to talk about that because Carl, as he mentioned, he is an author, and he is a wonderful storyteller. He has written a book called Unteachable Lessons, why wisdom can't be taught. And I mean, I dug into that book. It's wonderful. But in that book, he talks about the experiences that he had with Rhiannon. And I'm going to have them lead in with that. Let's talk about Rhiannon and all things Rhiannon.
You should lead off since
Well,
she was.
I should just give just a little bit of background.
Sure.
Rhiannon was born with polycystic kidney disease and underdeveloped lungs, and they didn't think she would make it at all. She was one of those miracle children that,
Mhm.
against all the odds, she made it. But she had a stroke when she was 3, and it left her paralyzed, basically as a quadriplegic in a
Wow.
wheelchair for the rest of her life. She was never able to walk, and she functioned pretty much as a child for the rest of her life.
Mhm.
And she had, because of her um, kidney disease, she was very fragile medically, and we spent a lot of time in doctors' offices
Mhm.
and in the hospital, in and out and in and out, and also in special ed. She was in special ed in
Mhm.
school. So, but she was just the most amazing being.
Yes.
She did. I have many people have come to me over the years and said, she just touched me in a way that nobody
Wow.
else had.
Yes.
uh, One man said to me one time, and I don't even remember who it was. I don't think it was somebody I knew, but for some reason, maybe we were at a meeting, and he ended up talking with her, and he
Uh-huh.
came to me afterwards and he said, I thought I had a lot of problems until I talked with her, and she has such a great attitude. And I realized, you know what? I don't have as bad of problems as I thought I did.
Right.
So she just made a difference in people's
Yes,
lives.
she did.
Rhiannon was somebody who had profound difficulties in
Mhm.
terms of her physical handicap, her chronic illness,
Mhm.
her inability to walk. There were cognitive impairments related to the stroke. The deck was stacked against her,
Mhm.
but you wouldn't know it to just get to
You're
know
right.
her. She was a ray of sunlight. She
That's
was
right.
fun. She was playful. She had an amazing sense of humor.
Amazing.
Loved people. Fran and I are both introverts, and we said it was her penance to live with two introverted parents because Rhiannon just wanted to party.
That's
She
it.
just wanted to be around people and have a good time. And so she just, joy was her thing.
Yes.
And it was infectious. And when she was excited about something, she would just, her face would light up. And I mean,
Right.
it was like incandescent light just
Right.
shining and forth. And so there was just so much fun to be around her.
Yeah.
And she, as Fran mentioned, because of her cognitive issues, she really did function pretty much like a child her entire life. I should
Mhm.
mention now for listeners, Rhiannon was with us for 29 years. Well, with Fran for 29 years, with
Mhm.
me the last 22 of those 29 years.
Mhm.
She left this earthly life in August of 2014. Of course, we miss her dearly.
Yes.
But so there was a beginning and an end, obviously, and
Mhm.
she had her measure of suffering because of her illness, but it never dimmed her spirit. When she was lying on her deathbed, just a couple of days before she died, she was actually trying to help a friend of ours plan her daughter's birthday party.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
it's just, so she went out the way she came in,
That's
just,
right.
she was a party girl. She just loved people. She loved joy, and she loved to share it.
That's right.
And it was just, I cannot fathom my good fortune to have been able to spend, over 20 years with this young lady. And there were challenges, and I mean, we can certainly
Absolutely.
talk about that. But,
Oh, we
but
will.
right now, I want to lead with the joy, because the joy was such
Yeah.
an important part of what it meant to be in relationship with
Yeah.
Rhiannon.
Well, she also she cared very deeply about people. If she loved you, she
Yes.
loved you.
Yes.
She cared, and you would sneeze, and she'd go, "Are you okay?
That's
Are you
right.
okay?" I mean, she worried. She's like, "Oh, I'm worried about so and so. They sneezed at school, or they were coughing, and I'm worried about them." And
Right.
because she cared, she really, really loved people.
And then the next time she saw you, she'd say, "How are you doing? Are you okay?
Right.
You sneezed the last time I saw you."
That's right.
It's like, Rhiannon, there was just some dust in the air,
Right. Wicked
but
memory though. She remembered. She
that was
remembered.
that was the depth of her
She did not
caring.
forget.
I remember one time I came home from work, and Rhiannon must have been about 19 or 20 at this point. And I walked in the house, and Rhiannon is just thrilled to see me. She's squealing, she's jumping up and down in her wheelchair, of course.
Yes.
The whole wheelchair is rocking back and forth. There's just all this joy, she's this little joy fountain.
That's right.
And Fran turns to me, and Fran says, "Now, how many daddies do you know that have a 19-year-old that's that excited to see them?" And it was a good thing
Yes.
for me to hear, because I had to stop and just cherish that moment.
That's it.
That sense of joy that she could express when she cared for you.
That's it. But that goes to that now. That goes to that whole aspect of being present. Like you said, and talking about and being in the now, because how many of those moments could have been missed or overlooked by the busyness that we have in life. You're coming in from work and probably just ready to pop down and decompress from the course of the day.
Yep.
But to have someone be that excited and to be able to say yes and to remember it and to recall it. I mean, as soon as you said that rocking in that chair, I remember when I used to come in, Miss Martin. And so I remember that. Because that, just like you said, there was not a moment when she was not excited about seeing you. And that's the beauty of someone who has an illness like that, and being able to take it in stride, because not all people who experience that are able to do that.
Right.
And to be fair, Rhiannon had her bad days. She was human. She could throw a temper tantrum for the ages.
Yeah.
And she, when she got angry, she could say cutting things. Rhiannon, I just in the
not an
interest
angel.
of being honest here.
Yes.
But, that's true of all of us. We all have bad days. We all have our shadow side. But the light that shone through her was so amazing. And again, it was just such a grace to have her in our lives.
Yes. Like I said, it was wonderful to read that chapter in the book, and the chapter is called Rhiannon, and you talk about your experiences. You talk about the interactions that you had with her. And yes, we talked about, every day was not always, rainbows and lollipops. We know that, that with the responsibility of taking care of someone who has a chronic illness, we have to be able to be in a space of filling our own cup, to be able to not only care for the person who has that chronic illness, but to also take care of ourselves, because we can get into spaces, just like you said, we're all human. We can get into spaces where the stresses of life, compounded with having to, have such, consistent contact, or care with that person. Times of resentment can come up, times of anger, times of frustration, of saying, every day, all day, really, those are the realities. And that's something that I definitely want to talk about, because especially in this time of pandemic, if someone is suffering with a extended illness and are requiring care, that person who cares for them is, not only having to deal with this pandemic and the fears that come along with transferring viruses and making sure that they're keeping themselves safe so that they can keep that person safe. There's, there are just, that's just the reality of it. How do you cope with that? How do you get, through that time and space? And you spoke about it so beautifully in the chapter. So, I want you to just expound a little bit on that experience.
Well, as I alluded to a few moments ago, I was Rhiannon's stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
Although I will say that for Rhiannon's part, she totally accepted me as dad, and we definitely had a daddy-daughter relationship. And and I had to learn how to be the caregiver that she deserved. And it is, I made mistakes along the way. And and so and you had mentioned the title of the book is Unteachable Lessons.
Yes.
And so that's really what I say in the book is that the greatest unteachable lesson I ever learned, and by unteachable lesson, I mean, you can't learn it from a book. You can't just take a seminar, a webinar, and in 2 hours, you will learn how to be a long-term caregiver. No, you learn to be a long-term caregiver by doing it, by living it. And that's what I really discovered was, when I first married Fran, and Rhiannon and I and Fran created a family, I was in some way, I was a young man. In some ways, I was not emotionally ready for the stresses and the strains of long-term caregiving. And I talk about this in the book. Fran and I had some big fights. We eventually started working with a therapist, which I think was a tremendous gift for our marriage. It really helped us. And and I had to deal with some feelings of resentment or some feelings of anger. You alluded to some of those things. And, but Rhiannon won me over. And, and I learned that life, life is not a dress rehearsal. This is it. This is our life. You talked about how now, living in the now, living in the present moment. This is what God has given us. And what I didn't realize was in the 22 years that I was Rhiannon's, I was her secondary caregiver, because Fran, of course, was her primary caregiver. But Rhiannon taught me how to love, and she taught me how to be a caregiver. And when Rhiannon died, I really had kind of this feeling, oh, I was such a failure for her. And Fran and friends of ours and family members and people who had seen Rhiannon's and my relationship, they would say, oh no, you were a gift to her.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, she was a gift to me. I'll admit that. But I didn't see how I was a gift to her. And they said, look at how much she loved you and cared for you. If you had not been a good dad to her, that wouldn't have been the case. And it was this interesting learning experience for me to realize, without even realizing it, that little girl taught me how to love.
Yeah.
And I will, and I believe in heaven. I believe we will see each other again. And I will thank her, for that tremendous gift that she gave.
Yes. Now you said something important. You said that, you were, her secondary caregiver. And of course, Fran, as her mom, you were her primary caregiver. And, a mother's love, of course, surpasses all, and even in that space, you still, I'm sure, experience times of frustration as well. People just figure, oh, well, you're her mom. You're always going to be on and ready and taking care of that. So, of course, speak to that a little bit.
Well, Rhiannon, to just give you a picture, even though she lived to be 29 years old, she had the self-care skills of a 2-year-old. So yes, it meant that she did need a lot of caretaking. And we talk about being present, being here now. It was really important. We learned that you had to be really present with her. That's where she was all the time. That's where she dwelled, was in the present. And if you were with her, it was really, really good to pay attention to her, not give her all the attention she wanted necessarily, but pay attention to what was going on with what she was saying, what she was looking like,
Right.
because she could change on a dime. You know, she could get upset or disappointed, or I mean, things could happen. And if you were watching her, you could often see a storm coming before it got there, and you could distract her with something else.
Right.
Change the topic, change the setting, sing a song, ask her something about something else, and avoid an unpleasant situation.
Right.
Because when you have someone that has a traumatic brain injury, which she had because of the stroke, they can be volatile and unexpected times. And so it really, really was a good idea to be present with her and pay attention.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, it is not always easy to be present with another person. It is just not. When you're doing well, doing your best, it works really well. But this is something that in fact, perhaps this is the thing that I wanted to say most of all to you and to your audience. I learned so many things from Rhiannon, so many things. But the thing that I go back to again and again and again is that you need to be gentle with yourself,
Right.
because every day is different. And so every day you just have to do the best that you can. And remember that your best is going to be different each day, because you're in a different place. You're in a different space, a different emotional place. You might be tired. You might be in a strange situation. There's so many variables that you cannot control. And you just need to make a commitment to do your best.
Yeah.
And remember that your best is different day to day. And forgive yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Give yourself space. You're not always going to do it perfectly. There's just no way you can, because it's such an enormous thing to be a primary caregiver to someone that has major medical issues and all the things going on with them that Rhiannon had going on with her.
Wow. I mean, and that, you said that's something that's so important for people to remember, is just for today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just for today. You know, if anything else, let me just do what I can for today. And let tomorrow take care of itself. Yesterday is already gone. And, you know, like you said, if you don't do that, like I said, you miss all of the joy and all of the wonderful things that she is excited about for that day, worrying about what happened yesterday.
Yes.
You know? And
Well,
she's already let go.
yeah. She was much better at that than me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of the things, now we eventually got a van that had a locking system, but before we had that, Rhiannon, of course, was always in a wheelchair. She never was able, from the time she was 3 years old and had her stroke till the time she passed away at 29. So for over a quarter of a century, over 26 years, she always required a wheelchair just to move in the world. And so to transport her, we had a van with a hydraulic lift.
Yes.
And then we would wheel her in, and then we had to use these tie downs to tie her wheelchair so it was safe in the van when off we would go. And it was an operation. It was a process.
Oh, it was.
I remember.
It took, you had some sense of that. And, you know, and so it was easy, especially for me, because I'm a fairly high energy person, and I, you know, kind of like to get with the program.
Right.
And with Rhiannon, the program just took time, you know. So one of the things I learned fairly early on was, you know, you just do it, but then you try to find ways to bring joy in the middle of the job.
That's it.
And with Rhiannon, as you already have alluded, singing songs,
Yes.
making jokes,
Yes.
coming up with just playful, silly stuff. Rhiannon and I would have pet names for one another. She was Kermit the Frog and I was Gonzo the Great. And so, and then that made poor Fran was Camilla the chicken. But Camilla and Gonzo, we were sweethearts. So it was so odd. But one time, Rhiannon, after that movie Shrek came out, Rhiannon decided she was the little donkey and I was Shrek, which made sense because I am kind of an ogre. And Fran got to be Princess Fiona. So, so we just would play.
Yeah.
And we were blessed because obviously Rhiannon, that was catnip for her. She loved to play. It may be different with a different, person that you're taking care of, where that person may be suffering more. But we were very blessed. But, I would say that, try to find the joy in the job however you can, because the job's going to be there,
Yes.
I mean, it's you just have to do what you need to do. But then the question, you can choose to feel all victimized about it. And, isn't my life terrible that I'm stuck taking care of this person? But that doesn't help anybody.
No.
Least of all yourself.
No.
And so then if you can just say, this is the place where God has placed me.
That's right.
And hopefully, I mean, obviously sometimes you're a caregiver of somebody that isn't family, but if it is family, hopefully you can say, and I love this person and I care for this person.
Right.
And we're going to just get through it. And I think that's one thing Fran and Rhiannon and I eventually, we did kind of become a little kind of like a team, the three of us,
Yes.
And that was very, very helpful. So I guess that really was important too.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's all about mindset, just like you said. You talk about, it's all in the terminology, and you said something, that I've heard other people who have been caregivers to say, I'm stuck. I'm stuck taking care of this person, and I'm stuck. So you're going into it with a negativity already attached to it. Instead of, I'm blessed to be able to be a part of this person's care. I'm assisting in helping them. I'm assisting in making, life a little more, a little easier for them. And that in essence is what we're doing. We're helping to make make them comfortable. We're helping to create a space that's going to, be, less tense. So when you look at it from that perspective, with and that it not being a chore, then you can begin to start saying, okay, so now how can we go about making this fun, or how can we go about tapping into those things that bring them that joy?
And I want to say this because I certainly have felt those stuck feelings. I don't know if Fran ever did. Maybe you did at some points. But so I don't, there's no shame in feeling those feelings.
Right.
It's normal. I think it's normal for a caregiver
Absolutely.
to get really angry and to get really frustrated and to shake your fist at God and say, why me? Well, why this person? Why are they so sick? And then why me that I am stuck? There it is, caring for this person. So I think those are just normal feelings. And if we feel those feelings, not to shame ourselves, but what I think you're alluding to, Kim, that I think is so important is that there's always the opportunity to make that shift.
That's right.
To make that shift from I'm stuck here to I'm blessed here. That this is an opportunity for me to be of service.
That's right.
And and I think that is so important for me and Fran, is that our commitment to Rhiannon was grounded in spiritual principles.
Yes.
And that I do believe that, and we're Christian, so we use Christian language. I hope anybody who listens that isn't a Christian, you can translate it. But in Christian language, we believe that Christ is present in every heart.
That's right.
And I mean every heart. I mean, even in mass murderers, even in Osama bin Laden, Christ is present in every heart. And part of the job of being a spiritual person is to find that divine presence.
Yes.
And when you can access that, then I think it's just a little bit easier to say, I am here to serve.
Yes.
I can serve Christ through Rhiannon,
That's right.
you know, and that, and then, you know, that becomes, then it becomes a privilege. It becomes an honor, you know. Again, you still have bad days. You still have those I'm stuck feelings.
That's right.
But that's, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you're tired. What do you do when you're tired? You take a nap, you go to bed. You know, what do you do when you're hungry? Go grab something to eat.
Right.
It's okay if sometimes you're like Francis, if sometimes your best isn't your best.
Right.
That's okay. But then take good care of yourself, which includes that spiritual, you know, whether it's meditation, contemplation, prayer. You know, there's many different disciplines that we can access, but doing that spiritual self-care helps us to recalibrate towards that love and that service.
Right.
And then you really can find joy, even in the midst of what might seem to be a very difficult circumstance.
Right.
Well, I I just also wanted to say that with Rhiannon, because she was a miracle child, they didn't think she would make it. And, you know, when she was 3 days old, they had said to, in a meeting with the doctors, they had said, we have no plan of care and we suggest you disconnect her life support systems. And I said, no, I just can't do that. She's fighting. And as long as she's fighting,
Right.
it's my job as her mother to support that.
Right.
And so I think they kind of looked at me like I was a little crazy, but we moved on, and it was amazing that she got better and came home and against all the odds. And then the stroke was really bad and things changed again. And I guess the reason I bring all that up again is because all of those things I brought home to me that she was not, the probability was that she was not going to be living to old age.
Right.
And so it made it easier to say, I need to be present with her as much as I can because our time is limited.
Right.
They didn't really expect her to make it out of her teens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was an absolute miracle. And I know for a fact that one reason she did was because of the love and support of people around her. So many people prayed for her.
Yes.
And prayed for us.
Right.
You know, that whole idea of it takes a village to raise a child. It took a lot of people to support Rhiannon in her life.
Right.
And I am so grateful to all the people that prayed for her, prayed for us, people that when we saw them or talked to them, they took time to interact with her.
Right.
And she loved that.
Yeah.
She absolutely loved that. That fed her. That was just the most wonderful thing for her.
Yeah.
One thing that we also did was that could work in the pandemic is she had a buddy or two that she could talk to on the phone. So her grandparents had passed, but there was a wonderful woman in our church, Miss Claudette, and she and Miss Claudette would chat on the phone together.
Mm-hmm.
And she just loved that. Just loved that. I mean, it was just the most incredible thing. And so even in the pandemic, if you can find any way for a person to interact with other people so that you have a little bit of a break, that's really helpful.
It's Zoom or
or FaceTime or whatever.
Right.
And listening to Fran speak, another thing I want to mention, I'm reading an interesting book right now. It's by a woman named Amanda Palmer, and the title is The Art of Asking. And Amanda Palmer is a musician, and so she's writing primarily for creative professionals. But I think that principle applies just as much to caregiving. And this was something that I saw with Fran. I mean, even when we were just dating, is that Fran knew how to ask for help.
Mhm.
And, she would ask me for help. She would ask other people. She'd ask her mother. Her mother was still alive at this point. And even into when we got into hospice care at,
Mhm.
at the end of Rhiannon's life, we had a whole team of people we called Rhiannon's minions. It was from that movie Despicable Me.
Yes, yes.
And so Rhiannon had her minions, and these were the people that we could count on. And so I think that, and the thing is we live in a culture, and this is what Amanda Palmer talks about in her book. We live in a culture that kind of militates against that. Like, it's wrong to ask. You should make your own way in the world, and all those kinds of things. And she's like, it is our nature as human beings. Human beings are social creatures.
Yes.
It is our nature to need help and to want to offer help. And that can be financial help, that can be just baking somebody a cake, that can be respite care. There's so many different ways, getting on the phone and giving somebody, the opportunity to go take a nap, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously everybody's circumstances are unique. And we know that what worked in our situation may not apply to other people's. But I think this principle is pretty universal. And that is, trying to find people that you can trust to ask for help, and then to do it, to be vulnerable enough to say, I really need your help right now. And I think most people, obviously, if somebody can't do it, they'll say no. But most people, I think, are honored when they're asked to help, and that becomes a way to strengthen those bonds. I do a lot of work. I think you know this, Kim. I do a lot of work with the Trappist monks. And the Trappist monks, they talk about their relationship in the monastery as bonds of charity. And a charity, not just in the sense of like, giving money to somebody who needs it, but charity in maybe the classical sense of compassion and love and care. And so I think that's what holds a family together, are bonds of charity. But that also, again, it takes a village, your tribe of people who can support you in whatever ways. It's those bonds of charity that make the helping and the caring and the support really happen. And it's just a beautiful thing.
You have spoken life, I hope, into, not only to me, but also into our listeners for that very reason. Because like you said, being able to ask for the help, being able to say that I need help, to be able to recognize that, it's more than, you've been given the responsibility to take care of that person, but you also realize that, okay, I have to have time to be able to pour back into myself so that I can come back strong. I need help. And especially, I'm sure, Fran, as a parent, and always being there to give consistent care, you begin to, or you have some people who think, nobody's going to take care of my child or my mom or anybody better than I can. And that's where that level of trust has to be established with those. You, in your instance, you trusted Carl to be able to be that secondary person. You didn't say, no, go and sit down. You're like, yeah, all right, your turn, tag, you're it. I'm sure after a while, it was kind of nice to be able to say, hey, your turn, baby's crying, that kind of thing, But
and then we would do that. If one of us was getting to the end of our rope, we would say, you need to take over now.
I need a break. Or you need a break, or
but it's just being able to, being able to be in that space to say that, to be able to be comfortable enough to say, you know what, I'm not a failure. I just need a break. I just need to recharge. I just need to regroup for a minute. So, it's not taken as a failure, or that you're not capable or competent. It's just that you need a break. All of us do. And that's just human nature, And so, I love that you addressed that, because that's something that's so important. It is important to have other people. I know it's difficult, like you said, in this time of pandemic, but, as you're establishing those ties, even like you said, if it's just to give that person an opportunity to hear that person's voice, or to see that person via Zoom. They have an opportunity to see somebody different or to see something different. And that helps. So, I mean, I love that you explain that because that's where people need to be, especially in this now, in this time of pandemic, to be able to find that space and not get caught in that vacuum. Just like you said, Carl, about feeling your feelings. It's okay to express those feelings, but it's not okay if you live in them and you don't know how to go past them. You had those feelings, you work through them, and then you come back and then you're able to move forward from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we have a friend who um, has come up with a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
She is godparents her to two little children that live out in the Northwest,
Uh-huh.
and she lives here in Atlanta.
She's one of Rhiannon's minions.
She's one of Rhiannon's minions too, and we just love her so much. And she knows that I can't remember the mom's name, the children's mom's name, or even the children's name, but she knows the mom is really busy, and it's hard being at home
Mhm.
especially during COVID, during the pandemic. And so during this pandemic, she's taken to getting online with the children in
Mhm.
the afternoon and reading them a book.
Oh, nice.
And she reads them a picture book and talks with them and plays with them, and they love it.
I like
And
it.
even if it's just 30 minutes, it gives mom a break.
Yes.
And the mom is so happy that she does that, because maybe she's trying to work online and she can't do everything at one
Mhm.
time. And if our friend Marla talks to these two godchildren that she loves dearly, then she keeps them occupied for a few minutes, and mom gets a break. So that's another idea.
That
Yeah.
reminds me of Cassidy.
Yes.
Cassidy calls her nephew on Zoom. I think she does it every day.
Ah,
A shout out to Cassidy Hall, who's the co-host of the podcast that I co-host, Encountering Silence. Little plug,
Yeah.
but the Cassidy and her nephew get on Zoom pretty regularly, maybe even every day, and they share a LaCroix. So the
Oh, nice.
nephew has his can of LaCroix.
Uh-huh.
Cassidy has her can. I think the nephew's in California. Cassidy's in Indianapolis,
Uh-huh.
and they just have their moment together. And it's kind of the same thing. I'm sure it gives Cassie, I don't know if it's her sister or her sister-in-law, but or the brother-in-law, gives the parents a break. And then Cassidy gets some auntie time. So,
There you
so there's
go.
lots of ways this can
There
play
you
out.
go. And everyone's cup is getting filled in a different way. And
Yes.
that's something, you're meeting needs on so many levels. They're getting the break, but then, like you said, they're getting an opportunity to spend time with friends and family. And that's the beauty in this, in being able to virtually do these things. We're doing things that we would have never thought to do
right.
had the pandemic not occurred. And so, it's happened, but it's taught us to be creative about the way that we connect with one another. And it still shows that it's something beneficial even for that person that has, the issues with terminal illnesses. It's helping everyone. This platform, this show is giving people opportunities to hear ways in which to cope with things. It's all about having a level of understanding and being and having a level of empathy and having a level of compassion about other people. It's about taking care of yourself, but it's also about taking care of yourself so that you can pour into others. I always say that. Take care of yourself to the point of overflow where you can pour into others. I love that we're able to do that, or that we can get into that space, and that we don't feel as though we're trapped. We don't feel as though we're being forced into something or we're being punished. We understand that it may be a feeling that we have. We are spiritual beings living a human experience. And so, we get to a space where, at times we may feel angered or frustrated, but then we turn around and we say, wait a minute. It's not just about, it's not just about me. It's about this person that I'm helping as well. It's about the energy that I'm bringing to that person as well. You know, people feel, they know, and I'm sure, Rhiannon was very keen, like you said, on knowing how you felt. I was a very jovial person in the season when our paths crossed. And if I came and was not having a good day, she'd be looking at me like, what's the matter with you? She just
But she
knew.
cared. Yeah,
She cared.
Because
Yes.
she cared. And so, and people have to be mindful of that too. The negativity or the feeling that you give off, that energy gets carried into that person too. So we have to be mindful of how we're carrying ourselves, because we can take down we can take a day that they may have been feeling good and turn it around based on how we're feeling. So it's just a matter of, like you said, being present, you know figuring out what we can do to make the experience best for everybody involved. So yeah, like I said, I appreciate you guys sharing that. Yeah.
We also had to cultivate a sense of humor.
Oh yeah.
That was very, very important, because sometimes a sense of humor was the only thing that would get us out of a bad place.
It was the lubricant of life.
Laughter is such a big thing.
Yes.
It's so important. And
Yes.
however you find that, not laughing at someone,
Yes.
but with someone, and just finding things as humorous as often as possible, because if you could find it humorous instead of disastrous, it
That's
made it
right.
a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And cultivating your faith in the goodness of life and in God, and in your, and having a prayer life, because there were so many times when prayer, I think, was probably the only thing that pulled us through. So many things with her, so many medical crises, and just so many situations. And so it was not only, as I said earlier, that other people were praying for us, it was also prayer with us, for our prayers. And at one point in time, we had a wonderful, for the last few years of Rhiannon's life, we had a wonderful CNA working with us, who, when I would go to work in the morning, Sharon would be here with Rhiannon. And when she was getting her up, they would start the morning off praying together.
Oh, nice.
And I just loved that. I just loved that. And Rhiannon just loved it too. And so it was a really wonderful thing. I think that was a very nurturing thing for Rhiannon as well. So, and prayer was so important to us, because if we hadn't been praying and finding some quiet time to meditate, I think we wouldn't have been able to do it all. It just, that we could never do it all just by ourselves. It just wasn't that way.
Right.
God knew we needed each other and we needed him. And so prayer was so important then, and it's still important, but particularly with caring for her.
The Bible promises that God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit that has been given to us. And I believe that, with my life. And I believe that's true universally. I think that's how any human being can love, is because that love comes from the source of all love.
Right.
But what prayer and meditation and contemplation do is they help us to remember this truth. And I mean that there's a pun there, to remember, that to embody this truth. So we literally become embodiments of divine love. And that can carry us even through those very difficult times.
I love that. Remember. That's right. Oh my goodness. That's a wonderful takeaway. That's a wonderful, wonderful segue into, just, as we start to wrap things up here, because like I said, I think it's been some wonderful nuggets, and I want people to be able to reflect on those things as well, is for us to, how do I say, we want to be able to be in a place where you know, when that person gets to the end of life, when that person gets to that space where they have transitioned, that we're left in a space of feeling that we've done what it was that we were called to do in that season, but that we're also able to transition into that space of moving beyond that space. Because when you've been in that space so long, you know, and then you know, are no longer there, what does that feel like? What does that look like when you have immersed yourself into loving and caring for someone for such an extended period of time? And then it's like, okay, how do you prepare for that?
That's a big question.
Yes.
You,
And, what comes to mind, is the day I was working out of the home at that point. I started working, in self-employment about a year before Rhiannon passed away.
mm-hmm,
And Fran was still working for the school board. Now, of course, she had time off after the passing and during the funeral and all that.
mm-hmm,
The day came when Fran went back to work, and I was in this house and I was all alone. And of course, Rhiannon had been in here with her oxygen machine making noise, and nurses and chaplains and all these kind of people coming in and out, the hospice social workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the minions. And suddenly I was in this space all by myself, and it was quiet. And I love silence.
mm-hmm,
I'm kind of a semi monk. I mean, I'm very happily
mm-hmm.
married, but I've got monkish tendencies. But 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 that was a tough day.
Yeah,
That was a tough day, and learning to be okay with it. And Fran and I, we've, and this has been a conversation we've had literally for 6.5 years now.
wow,
The missing never goes away.
right,
It just never, and some days are worse than others. Some moments are worse than others. There will be something that will just remind me of Rhiannon, and it's like a little pin to my heart, and I can see it with Fran. She might tear up if something reminds her or whatever. And we just know this, we don't want that to heal, because that is the topography of our love for Rhiannon.
mm-hmm,
And but it is hard. And I think that's number one, is to acknowledge it's hard. Grief, we're talking about grief is a process like anything else.
right,
So I think a lot of things we've been talking about: being gentle with yourself,
that's right,
trusting that some days will be better than others, leaning on friends, asking for what you need, taking good care of yourself. All of that still applies. It's kind of like the work is not done,
that's right,
but maybe at that point you've given the person back to God.
mm-hmm,
That's really, really important. And that was what really helped us. A monk talked to us about this, that God gave her to us, and now it was time for us to give her back to God.
that's right,
And so we've done that. Now it's like all that work we focused on caring for her,
right.
we really need to focus on caring for ourselves.
There you have it.
And it's been a journey.
So that brings up two little things that I wanted to mention. One is that is a story that someone else told. Um, a friend of a friend. Um, the woman's father passed. He'd been very ill,
Mm-hmm,
and he passed. And she was grieving and grieving and grieving. And she said, one night she dreamed that she saw her father and was talking to him. And she said, "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry that we put you through all that medical stuff. It was so hard, and I'm just so sorry. It didn't seem to make a lot of difference. You passed anyway." And he said to her, "All I remember is the love."
right,
And I think, okay, so all that happened to Rhiannon, she had so many medical things, so
mm-hmm,
many hard things medically, but I believe all she remembers is the love.
that's right,
And then we have a friend that was more Rhiannon's age,
mm-hmm,
someone that was
Rhiannon's
Rhiannon's,
friend. Yeah.
Rhiannon's friend.
uh-huh,
And he dreamed that he saw Rhiannon, and they were walking around together. Rhiannon never could walk. In her whole
Wow.
life, she could not walk.
Right.
She wore AFOs to stabilize her ankles, and sometimes KAFOs that came all the way up to her thighs to stabilize her knees for transferring and so forth. And he got in touch with me. He said, I took a nap, and when I don't usually take naps, but I took a nap and I was really discouraged about some things in my life. And I saw Rhiannon, and we were walking around together.
Wow.
Walking around, and she kept saying to me over and over again, I love my life now. I love my life now.
Wow.
And he said, I was just so stunned, you know. And she said, well, let's sit down. And so he said, sure. So they went to sit down, and they sat down on beanbags, chairs, which was something that Rhiannon loved when she was really little. Something that she outgrew because it was hard to lift her in and out of a beanbag chair. But so they sat down, and he looked down and saw her feet, and she had on her ankle foot orthotics, her AFO. And there was someone with them in the dream. He didn't know whether it was her grandmother or a caregiver or a guardian angel, but someone. And the person said to him, she wears those AFOs here to remind her of all the things she overcame on earth.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And so, having had those two things, the stories told to me, now when I miss Rhiannon, I think she loves her life now.
Yes.
She's gotten the message to me through a friend.
Yes.
She loves her life now.
Yes.
I believe that all she remembers is the love.
That's right.
And I believe I will see her again.
Yeah.
And so I tear up sometimes. I miss her, and I just talk to her. I assume that she can hear me. And I say, I'm missing you. I miss you. I would love to have a hug. I would love to hold your hand. I would love to hear you laugh. But I am so happy that you are happy where you are, and I will be there with you one day.
That's it. That's it.
You know, and I mentioned this in the book, but, before Rhiannon passed away, she asked each one of us to look out after the other.
Yes.
And so, and Fran and I have talked about this, that really the best way we can honor Rhiannon now is to live our best life.
That's right.
Even without her, even missing her.
Yes.
But Fran has taken on some wonderful new art projects that she does. She's a very, I know in audio you can't see it,
right.
But if people come and visit my website, I've got a page devoted to Fran's stuff. They can see some of her stuff. But Fran has taken on some art. I continue to do my writing and my work. Fran and I have started this new ministry in our church where we help people who are preparing for baptism or for confirmation. And it's we miss her.
We do.
But we figure one way to honor her is to try to live our lives with joy.
And you've answered the question of that I always ask at the end of each show is how you're living in the now, and you're doing that through your artwork, through your ministry, through your writings and what have you. And that's part of the joy of being able to know that we've done what we can, but that we're also, in taking care of others, that we're taking care of ourselves as well. Because we don't know what the next, challenge may be. We don't know that we may not be called to yet again help someone else in our family who may experience something. But we're prepared. We're ready, and we know what to do. Should it happen again? And it's a possibility. We do not know. We don't know what, but we just know that the Lord prepares us for those things that he sets for us to accomplish, and we achieve those things. And I just, I think that it's wonderful. The one thing, you all were talking about little memories that you have. I have one memory of something that Rhiannon said to me, and we were talking about, it was the 30 days have September, 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except grandma. She rides a bicycle. And I'm all, still remember that. I was like, what does grandma riding a bicycle have to do with the 30 days of September? I will never forget that, Fran. I mean, I remember, still contemplating years later, like, what in the world did that child mean by 30 days in September? 30, if we're doing that in November. But, all of us had 31, but grandma, she rides a bicycle and she would crack up laughing because I was like,
and Rhiannon, if you said, Rhiannon, what's a non sequitur? She would not be able to answer that question, but she knew that was funny. She
knew that. She would crack up laughing, and I have never forgotten that to this day. And I said, 30 days. I was like, I have no idea what that means, but it just cracked me up, and it cracked her up. But it's the little things. It's the little things, that carry us through. And I have to say, she touched my life, like I said, in a way that I will never forget. And it will always eternally keep us connected, because, Fran and I both worked for the same school system. And, our paths would cross. And then, I remember when we finally got a chance to see each other some years later, and she shared with me that Rhiannon had passed, and I shared with her that my daughter had passed. They had met, and now our daughters are there together, and we will both see them both again. Yes. And I know this to be true. And so, that just warms my heart too, that they're there together, and, it's going to always connect us. And so, like I said, I thank you guys so very much for being here, with me to talk about, this experience that you've had, and also, to help others to be able to go through this experience, with a little bit more wisdom and knowledge than they may have prior to listening to the show. But I want to definitely give you an opportunity to leave some words with our listeners, before we wrap things up, and tell them how they can get in contact with you. But yeah, please share some parting words with our audience.
Stay connected to people you love, however you can do that, whether it's via phone, via Zoom, having socially distanced walking, porch visits. It's so important, because your family of your heart, as well as your family by blood, that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. Don't postpone joy.
Don't postpone
joy. Joy is, as the name of your podcast so clearly shows, it is the now that matters. And one of my favorite lines, it comes from a medieval mystic, a Christian spiritual master named Julian of Norwich. She lived in the 1300s. And she said, the fullness of joy is to behold God in all. And I believe that is just so true. So learning to see the divine presence in all people, in all situations, in all circumstances, it's there. We don't often notice it, but I think that becomes a really important spiritual practice, is to just look for that divine presence, listen for the flutter of angels' wings. And I think when we try, we will notice. So I'm the one with the website, but I do have some of Fran's art on the website. I'm gonna spell it because it's an Irish word. It's
okay.
A-N as in Nancy, A-M as in Mary, CHARA.com. That's anamcara.com. It's an Irish word that means soul friend. So that's it. And of course, you can learn more about my books and my ministry, my blog, the podcast that I do, et cetera, et cetera. But then also, we have an e-commerce section where you can purchase the books, also purchase some of Fran's original art as well. So
awesome sauce. Well, it doesn't get any better than that. That's how you all are living in the now. And again, I so appreciate you being here. Yeah, I love you with my whole heart. I thank you for sharing this space with me, for all that you continue to do through your ministry, and the wonderful example that you set for others, and showing God's grace and God's love. I appreciate that so much. Okay, and so that will do it for us for this edition of the How Now podcast, where we talk about how to live in the now. And until I see you all the next time, I say peace.
Thank you so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.